Okay, here we go. Okay, so as a reminder, the first chapter we did was on this energy and thermodynamics, just kind of like an intro to get you guys ready for respiration and photosynthesis. And then the other two main topics were respiration and photosynthesis. So I want to do this because I think, I don't know if it's helpful, but from my mind, I feel like it's helpful to basically show you how I go through and make the exam. So I've already made the exam. But what I do, more or less, make sure you guys can hear me, is I'll go through my slideshows. So you want to study the slideshows. The study guides are helpful and maybe will help you focus in a bit more, but the amount of detail that you need is in the slideshow. So I'll go to my slideshows basically, and I'll go to a slide like this where I define photosynthesis and respiration, and I'll think, okay, what is the relationship between photosynthesis and respiration? What does photosynthesis do? What does respiration do? And basically make up a question based directly off of this slide. So photosynthesis is taking sunlight, making glucose. Respiration is breaking that glucose down, right? Another example, the very next slide is a good one. Vocabulary. I will ask you vocabulary, and here you want to know catabolism breaks down molecules. It releases energy. It's also called an exergonic reaction. So this level of detail, I don't put more detail in the slides that I want you to know. I try to limit it so it doesn't get too confusing. So I literally look at the slides and then make questions off of that. Again, I don't know how helpful that is. You can't predict exactly which questions I'm going to ask, obviously, or what exactly I'll ask about. I will definitely ask something off of this slide. So if you know all of this information, you'll at least get one question right, probably more than one, because this was a pretty big topic that we talked about. Maybe a slightly more complicated concept was this, where I talked about free energy. So in this box, there's relationships, right? So if there's more free energy, it's less stable. If there's more free energy, there's greater capacity to do work. So I like to make those linkages and comparisons a lot of times. So understanding those relationships is kind of another level, beyond just memorizing. You can just memorize this, but if you actually understand it, it'll be a little bit easier to answer. I try to word the questions in very similar ways to how I have the stuff worded on the slides, just to not confuse you. If you guys have questions or are under any of this, please stop me. Graphs. We had some graphs this time around. So understanding what, different, I don't show a graph if it's not important. So understanding what these graphs are telling you, which is basically outlined down here. Again, I try to, as much as possible, give you the words in addition to any kind of image. So you know exactly what to know from those different pieces. Yeah, so all of those worksheets that you've done, study those, because those are really important concepts. Otherwise, I wouldn't have given you worksheets to do on them. So yeah, study the worksheets that you've done in this unit. Yeah. Yeah, and any corrections I kind of either talked about in class. I'll actually, should I bring a pen? Of course not. Oh, yeah. I'm going to make a note I'll post, if I haven't already, I'll post the keys to those worksheets so you guys have the correct answers just in case. For respiration, okay, I'll post the other ones. Definitely study those. Those are very helpful and obviously things that I think are pretty important. Okay, so that's kind of insight into how I make the test. From there, it's kind of up to you how you want to conglomerate this information and study it. Like I said, I think quizzing is a great way to realize if you know it or not. Note cards, Quizlets, however you want to quiz yourself. Studying with someone else is helpful. They can ask you questions, that kind of stuff. Okay, let's see. Yeah, so any questions about that? Like I said, I don't know how helpful that is because I'm not sure, you can't predict exactly what I'm gonna ask, but that's what I look at when I make the questions. I literally look at the slides and then write the question like side by side.
I know it's going to be very heavy on the cycles.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yes, go ahead.
Is there any other thing you need to know about the cycles? Like, I don't really
Right, go through them. Right. Yeah, so let's pull up. I'll pull up the citric acid cycle or the Krebs cycle real quick. There we go. I need to share that with you guys. So Shay was asking about the cycles, like what aspects of the cycles you need to know. That is, unfortunately, that's an area where I put the cycle up there and there's additional information that you don't need to know. So I tried to point out the important parts here. So this is a citric acid cycle, that second step in respiration. So the molecules you need to know. So here I even made a note. Know the circled molecules. You only need to know those three. You can ignore the rest of the molecules in the cycle here. You do, for all of these steps, you want to know those really important outputs or what is being used. So in this case, it would be NADH, ATP, and FADH2. So those are the molecules that I put in those tables at the end of each of the steps of respiration that kind of accounts for how many of those are made or used in each step. So any molecules that I want you to know, I've made specific note of. For the Calvin cycle, I made note of specific molecules as well, so we can go look at that. But you don't need to know any of the additional ones. Yeah. If you guys on Zoom have any questions, please just chime in. I don't think I have the chat box up. There we go. Okay. All right. So yeah, you want to study these tables as far as what's being made where. So I could ask you, when are the CO2 made? They're made in pyruvate oxidation and citric acid cycle. And, understanding it on a deeper level will help you figure that out because you're losing carbon in each of those steps. So if you're counting the carbons, you can figure out where the carbon dioxides are made because the carbon's coming out of the cycle that way. But yeah, I don't usually like to have people memorize just numbers like this, but these are really important numbers when it comes to respiration. And then I did the same thing on that one slide for photosynthesis for the Calvin cycle. Any other questions about cycle stuff? You want to make sure you know where different processes happen. I've mentioned that before. So where in the mitochondria, different parts of respiration happen, what part of respiration happens outside the mitochondria, which is glycolysis. It's the only step that doesn't happen in the mitochondria. Yeah, a lot of those are just hidden. A good review would be to rewatch the Amoeba Sisters summary video probably, just so you have that overview and you can pause it and kind of take notes on those details too. Okay. Do you guys want me to go over anything in particular? So the cycles we talked about a little bit. You want me to talk about the Calvin cycle or? Yes.
You just have like
Recommendations and an easy way to remember the two formulas for photosynthesis and respiration.
Oh,
Like I know they're reverse of one another,
right.
but I always struggle with the numbers.
Oh, like the numbers of each molecule.
Mhm.
So in respiration, it's 6, so almost everything except for, here, we'll go there. So to start with, let me switch this on here too. But yeah, that's a good question. You definitely want to know the specific formulas for photosynthesis and respiration. Let's share this. There. Okay, so here we have the formula. So first off, know which side glucose is on. Are you making glucose or are you breaking it down? In respiration, we're breaking it down. So it starts out on the reaction side, on the reactant side, right? It's an input. We're going to break it down into other stuff. Glucose for these reactions, we always just have one molecule of glucose. We're either breaking one down or we're making one. That's what the rest of the reaction is based on. The fact that we're breaking only one molecule of glucose down or we're making one molecule of glucose.
For respiration, that's when we're getting the energy and using it.
That's when the energy is being made. Yeah. So energy is over here on the product side. So we're going from glucose and we're making energy. So if you can remember, okay, one molecule of glucose, and then you just have to kind of remember 36 ATP. There's a 6 in there at least, I guess. The other 3, there's 6 of each. So there's 6 O2s, 6 CO2s, 6 H2Os. A way to potentially remember that oxygen is also a reactant here is another really important concept. Oxygen is that final electron acceptor. Right at the end of respiration, oxygen has to be there to grab onto all those electrons that were moving through the electron transport chain. So that makes it a reactant as well. We need oxygen in the process to make these products. And when you think of yourself, respiration, it's a different kind of respiration, but it's related. When you breathe in, you're breathing in oxygen, right? That's your respiratory system. And you breathe out CO2, so you're making CO2. So we do respiration, we don't do photosynthesis. So we take in oxygen as a reactant, and then we release CO2. So maybe that's a helpful way to remember which is on which side. And then water, you're also expelling water when you're breathing out water vapor. Yeah, so that's kind of a few little additional tricks, I guess you could say, but I think the fact that there's 6 of each of these makes it a little bit easier. At least it's not like 6 and 9 and 12. So does that help at all? Okay.
I'm just gonna remember everything's like 12, 6, or 2.
And like you have 6 carbon and 6 oxygen, just 6 on 6, 6.
Oh yeah, there you go. So yeah, that's actually, yeah, if you have 6 oxygens in glucose and you have 6 oxygen molecules, but yes, that's good. 36. Okay.
Can you go over the production of NADH?
Yes, production of NADH.
Is that when you lose the electron?
When you go from NAD plus to NADH, it's that molecule is gaining. Yeah. So if we look at this slide, so yes, that's our electron shuttle. When you originally have NAD plus, let's see if I have this on a kind of, we'll go to here. I don't have like the full process showing, but I do have it written out here. We start with NAD plus in respiration and glycolysis. You add an electron. It's basically a hydrogen atom that you're adding because it has an electron on it, right? So you get NADH. So NAD plus an electron makes NADH. That's a reduction reaction. because it becomes more negative with that. It goes from a plus to a neutral, so that brings the charge down, right? Because of the electron is negative. That's, I mean, as far as making NADH, that's really all you need to know. Yeah. What other questions do you guys have? Anything you need clarification on or help with remembering? Okay, if nothing else right now, we'll do the Kahoot quiz and I'll probably stop at each question and sort of expand a little bit, give you a little extra information as kind of an additional review to just those questions. So I posted the Kahoot quiz, it's on Canvas already, so you should be able to access it and run through it. I think it's 15 questions again. All right. And that's over here. Classic. Okay. And the setup of the exam is the same. It's 35 multiple choice and then 5 fill in the blank. There's a couple bonus questions as well this time. Yeah, and we'll be doing like we have the past couple times in the bio labs. So we'll meet there at noon on Monday. Okay. I'm assuming that's everyone who's going to join. All right. Here we go. Yeah. So what type of reaction requires an input of energy? Okay, anabolic. So that goes back to that slide I just showed you guys with anabolic, catabolic, exergonic, endergonic. There's 2 names for each of them basically. So you have reactions that require energy to happen, an input of energy. Those are going to be endergonic, also called anabolic. So anabolic steroids, that's how I can remember it, build muscle. So anabolic is building stuff which takes energy. So that's going to be endergonic. The other 2, exergonic and catabolic, are also synonyms. They're going to release energy. It's breaking something down, which releases energy. Okay. If a system has very little free energy, it's considered yeah, this is a tough one. This is a tough
So that
one.
means it doesn't have okay.
So yeah, this is a really tough concept. Those are those boxes that I was just showing you where I was like, oh, it has a lot of free energy, so it's not stable. There's like 4 bullet points in each of those boxes regarding entropy, stability, the ability to do work, I think those are the main, yeah, the main points in there. Okay, so as a reminder, free energy is energy that can do work, essentially. So if there is very little free energy, let's look at the ones that are wrong. It doesn't have a high work capacity. So you can cross that one out. So no high work capacity if there's not a lot of free energy. There's basically no energy to do anything. We'll do entropy in a little bit. Well, yeah, we'll do entropy before I go on to stability. Entropy is disorder. So when you see entropy, think disorder. With
That's the second thermodynamic law, right?
yes, that's the second thermodynamic law. So low entropy means low disorder. So it means it's very highly ordered. Something that is very highly ordered and put together and complex has basically a lot of capacity to do work. So if you think one of the examples I gave in a way was like a building that's been built up. So you have a building, it's really highly ordered. It's not disordered at all, right? So it's very highly ordered, but there's a lot of energy that can be released from that when you demolish it or whatever. So that would be an example of the relationship between entropy and free energy. So entropy is the toughest one, I think, to wrap your head around. So we got the work capacity, we got entropy, the stability aspect. If it has very little, I always have to kind of stop and work this out in my head as well. If it has very little free energy, it's basically really stable. That building has been demolished, essentially. If there's not a whole lot of free energy, there's not a lot of work capacity, it's really stable. So you can think of the analogy I gave was the ball rolling down the hill. So at the bottom of the hill, it has little free energy and it's really stable at the bottom of the hill. If it's at the top of the hill, it has a lot of free energy, but not very stable because it's kind of, you can think of it on the precipice. Yeah, more potential energy, yeah. So yeah, we didn't call it potential and kinetic energy. In biology, they just use slightly different terms in this case. But yeah, little free energy makes it really stable. Okay, that's a tough concept. Spend some time looking at those few slides in the energy and thermodynamics lecture. All right. Number 3, what is phosphorylation? All right, nice. So yeah, hopefully if you see phosphorylation, think phosphate, right? So you can ignore the hydroxyl ones. And we didn't really talk about hydroxyl groups at all. We talked a lot about phosphate groups with ATP. So phosphorylation is adding a phosphate group to something. Usually we're talking about ATP or ADP in this case. If you add one more phosphate group to ADP, you get ATP, which is what we're going for. So there's phosphorylation and hydrolysis. This is adding a phosphate group. Hydrolysis is chopping a phosphate group off or removing it. So lysis means to split. You can think of it that way. So you're splitting a molecule that has a phosphate group on it to get rid of one. So phosphorylation and hydrolysis are the opposite of each other. All right. With an enzyme present, a reaction's what is decreased? Nice, yep. Activation energy. So let's see. It affects nothing else about the reaction. It doesn't affect how much energy is released. It doesn't affect how many energy is needed at the very, well, starting energy wasn't even a concept we really talked about. And then what else? Free energy doesn't affect the free energy. It just affects that initial hump that the reaction has to get over to get started. That's the activation energy. So I can't remember if I put this on the exam, but it is very likely that I asked about what an enzyme does to a reaction. It decreases the activation energy.
But it still has the same result, the same product, right?
Yep, same product. It doesn't affect anything else about it. Beginning and end, the exact same. It's that in between that it just helps out a little bit. Yep. All right, number 5. What type of enzyme inhibition involves the inhibitor attaching to the active site? It's very specific. All right, nice, yeah. So this is a pretty straightforward kind of definition type question, competitive versus non-competitive inhibition. Competitive inhibition, the inhibitor attaches to the active site, which is normally where the substrate would go. So it's competing with the substrate. And then non-competitive inhibition, the inhibitor attaches somewhere else on the enzyme, but kind of makes the enzyme change shape. So it still doesn't work with the substrate. So those are just two different kinds of inhibition of enzymes. Yeah, just a definition kind of thing. Okay, competitive inhibition. Number 6. What process is the reaction below showing? Sorry, doesn't look very big.
Yeah, you did that.
Yay! Everyone got it. That is respiration. Awesome. So you have 1 glucose and 6 oxygen going to carbon dioxide, 6 carbon dioxide, 6 water, and then ATP. 36, yeah. I said 36 ATP, yeah. So I'll get out of here. There we go. So glycolysis is the first part of respiration, right? But that's just where glucose is going to, do you guys remember what the end of glycolysis is? The end molecule? Yeah, 2 pyruvates. So you want to know, glycolysis is a really important aspect of respiration. So you go from 1 glucose, you end up with 2 pyruvates. All right, Grace still in the lead. Where does the citric acid or Krebs cycle occur in the cell? No. The matrix of the mitochondria. So these locations can be really tough because it's hard to, you have to know what the location name means, and you also have to remember where the heck this one little piece of respiration or photosynthesis happened. So glycolysis, that first step of respiration, we're outside the mitochondria. We're just in the cytoplasm of the cell. Moving into the second stage, the Krebs cycle, you go into the innermost part of the mitochondria, which is called the matrix. So the Krebs cycle is in the matrix.
That thing that you posted on the, it says.
Yeah. Yeah, some of those memes are kind of helpful sometimes. And then oxidative phosphorylation is the last step. Do you guys remember? I don't think I asked that here. Where does that generally happen?
Space.
Yeah, so it's across a membrane. So it's across the inner membrane of the mitochondria between the matrix and the intermembrane space. That's a tough one. Just remember, it's on a membrane. That's where the inner membrane of the mitochondria essentially is where the oxidative phosphorylation happens. So you go from outside the mitochondria to the very inside and then out to that inner membrane. That's the 3 steps of respiration where they occur. No movement. Oh yeah, no one got it right. What is the final product of glycolysis? Oh, I did ask this. Everyone better get this. Oh, close. All right, 2 molecules of pyruvate. Glycolysis, that very first step in respiration. The end result is 2 molecules of pyruvate. What else? Molecule of glucose, G3P, okay. All right. Number 9, which stage of respiration involves the molecule oxaloacetate? The Krebs cycle. So oxaloacetate is essentially what is at the end of the Krebs cycle. That's what kind of continues it going. So it's one of those 3 molecules that I just showed you circled on the Krebs cycle at the very top there. There's oxaloacetate, you have acetyl-CoA coming in, those combine, and then you get citrate. And then you go around the rest of the cycle that we don't care about what's in between there. Yeah, that's the one on the, it was on the left. Yeah, oxaloacetate. All right. All right, Jeremy, taking over the lead. What is the final electron acceptor in respiration? All right, nice. Most people got that. So oxygen, you want to know that definitely. The final electron acceptor in respiration is oxygen. Oxygen's really good at grabbing onto electrons because it's really greedy for electrons. So that makes it a really great final electron acceptor. All right, we have 10 minutes, right? Yeah. What are the two products of photosynthesis? So moving into photosynthesis now. Nice, yes, glucose and oxygen. Why are plants so necessary for us? Because they give us oxygen, and hopefully you're remembering that the whole purpose essentially of photosynthesis is to make glucose. Awesome. Glucose and oxygen. All right. Which molecule below is a photosynthetic pigment? Nice, yes, chlorophyll. So chlorophyll is considered a photosynthetic pigment. It's just a molecule. It's what initially absorbs the sunlight. I don't think I asked that on here. I never know what questions are coming up next, so I might be giving you the answers. But chlorophyll is the molecule, the photosynthetic pigment that absorbs the sunlight in the very first part of photosynthesis. Do you guys remember why leaves are green?
Because they reflect.
Yeah, they reflect green light, right? Chlorophyll doesn't really absorb the green light, it reflects it.
Okay, that's pigment.
Yep. 13. Where do the light reactions of photosynthesis take place? So another location thing.
Come on, you like it that way. Really? I think so. I understand. Told you.
Thylakoid membrane. All right, so we're not dealing with mitochondria in photosynthesis. So you can cross out the mitochondria right off. We are in the chloroplast. So so the inner membrane of the chloroplast, I can see how people would think that, but now we're moving. So the inner membrane of the mitochondria is where we have the membrane stuff in respiration. In photosynthesis, it's the thylakoid membrane, which are those stacks of like green looking coins, the membrane on those. So a pretty unique location, thylakoid membrane. I think that's the only membrane we deal with in photosynthesis. So if you're wondering if I'm asking you anything about a membrane, it's the thylakoid membrane.
Yeah. Oh, we have 2 questions.
Which of the following processes occur in both respiration and photosynthesis? Okay, chemiosmosis. So a lot of people put glycolysis. Glycolysis only happens in respiration. That's the splitting of glucose. We don't want to split glucose in photosynthesis. We're trying to build it. Does anyone remember what chemiosmosis is? What does it involve?
Does osmosis have to do with like water?
No, but you're kind of on the right track. Movement of something. Like usually it's movement of water, right? Osmosis. So chemiosmosis is the movement of hydrogen ions. So we're moving those hydrogen ions across a membrane. In photosynthesis, it's the thylakoid membrane, or during the light dependent reactions. In respiration, it's at the end where the electron transport chain is happening. So we're moving those ions across the inner membrane of the mitochondria. So chemiosmosis, you're moving hydrogen ions in both respiration and photosynthesis. The whole point of that is to what? What do the hydrogen ions end up doing? Yeah, they go back through ATP synthase, and that's what makes ATP. So that happens in both respiration and photosynthesis. Last one. How many cycles of the Calvin cycle have to occur to make one molecule of glucose?
That was speaking as if.
Yay, awesome, two cycles of the Calvin cycle. So it has to go around twice in order to make one molecule of glucose. Awesome. All right. Let's see who we got on the podium. Victoria, nice, number 3. Number 2, Grace, awesome. Number 1, Jeremy, nice, good job. Okay, who are the runners up? John and Chloe, nice job, guys. Okay, so use that quiz as well as kind of a study tool. Think of other questions that are kind of associated with those. That's helpful. And if you have any questions, email me. Otherwise, I'll be around this afternoon too. Oh, sorry, Victoria, I didn't see your questions. Yeah, I'll be around for office hours this afternoon, or I'll see you and on Monday morning, but I'll see you in the biology lab on Monday morning for the exam.
I also do my little